I'm recording the meeting now. We're meeting with the Masters of the Journey. It's late in October in 2017. The conversation tonight is going to be based around your path to consciousness, seeking beyond boundaries. My name is Dr. John Mason. I'm the founder and main facilitator of Masters of the Journey, and we have people from around the country who are members of the group and just interested in sharing and presenting information today. One of the main features of Masters of the Journey is we believe that everyone is a master. Whether they know it or not, they have the information deep within them. They are connected and perfect because of their connection to the divine spirit. Sometimes it helps for them to tell their stories. I was speaking with Paula, who's on the line tonight, this afternoon, and we mentioned that a lot of people take it for granted. When we have an awakening or epiphany or an enlightenment process, sometimes we just think it's normal. We take it for granted. We might not even know that it's been a very important experience. I'll share one example from myself. When I was 19 years old, I was very naive. I was a student at UCLA. I went to a weekend retreat workshop, and one of the conversations that they were having, and I went to this one, was on what was death and dying. Go experience death. And I was in a room with people that were older than me, and there was maybe 20 or 25 people. And the guy says, we're going to do a guided visualization. I want you to get out of your body, go see what death is. And he led the exercise. It was pretty nice. Being 19 and very naive, I did what I was told. And I got out of my body, and I went up, and I was looking down on my body. That got boring. I turned around and went out into the void until I got to a place that I thought was about halfway to what death was. I don't know what the benchmark is, Rodger, but I got about halfway. Oh, in front of me was a dark horizon. On the other side of the horizon was death. It was warm. It was inviting. I felt an amazing level of acceptance and unconditional love. It really felt inviting, and I felt like I had a choice to complete the process and go there, or the question, should I go back to my life and get back in my body? The answer came to me that I wasn't quite done doing what I was doing, and I should go back and get back in my body. And yet I really felt very strongly, powerfully, that there was an attraction on the other side, and that death and dying was not a scary experience. I didn't think anything of it. I went back, got back in my body. The guy in the front of the room asked everybody at the end of the exercise, he said, you know, did anybody experience anything? And I was one of the younger guys, so I waited, I looked around, and I said, is anybody raising their hand? Nobody was raising their hand. And I said, okay, well, this is what I experienced. And I went and I experienced what death and dying was, and it was full of unconditional love, acceptance, and support. There was wisdom. It was a really attractive experience. I said it in a very matter-of-fact way. The guy in the front of the room who had been doing a little bit of studying started getting very excited and jumping up and down. Because I shared that experience at that moment in time, he reflected back to me how important that experience was. At that point, I knew that my life had been changed. It was something that I took for granted. So, do we have those experiences throughout life and may take them for granted unless we get a chance to share them? Masters of the Journey is designed to help people share their stories, and that's what we're doing tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about consciousness, perhaps what enlightenment is. I want to start with that, and then ask whether we can do that without a formal, disciplined philosophy, without formal training and years of practice. Can we get there in a different way? And I think people will be sharing some of their insights about that. So on the line, we have some people that I've invited to present. We have Rodger Ruge from Netherlands. Rodger, will you say something so you can take center screen?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on, John. Happy to be here.
Great. And what's the elevation that you're at?
8,500.
We'll see. So you're a lot more elevated than the rest of us. Okay. We also have Don Lay on the call tonight, and Don Lay is a character who I have a lot of love and respect for. He presented in January to our local group about a near-death experience that he had, and every meeting he brings his wisdom and insight to us. And hi, Don, could you just say hi so you can take center screen?
Hi, John. Good to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
Yes, and we're going to keep you on the bench because I know that you've got stuff to say. And we have Paula Forget from Canada, but living in Bellingham, and she's written a book that she's going to hold up, which is all about developing consciousness and getting into the higher realms, which is something that opened my eyes to a lot of really important information. Paula, can you introduce yourself and hold up your book, please? Paula.
Hi, John. Yes, I'm Paula. And hi, John, I'm Paula.
Oh,
and,
good.
So I live in Bellingham, and this is my book, Guided to the Higher Realms, Personal Journey of Ascension Through Meditation.
Thank you. Thank you. So we got Jim calling in from Boulder, but he's not on video, so he'll probably wait and ask questions a little bit later if he has them and make some comments. I don't know who else is going to be showing up, but we're gonna start the meeting. I believe that if we're talking about consciousness and we're talking about enlightenment, can people achieve enlightenment on their own? What does enlightenment mean? And just very briefly, I wanted to say, for me, what enlightenment is knowing that we are all connected to the divine spirit and each other. We remember the joy of unconditional love and support and the pure acceptance that goes along with it. We feel the freedom from the limitations of the ego and physical body with its entrapment into 3 dimensions and the time-limited existence. We know our connection with the universal wisdom. We remember that we are much greater than the physical incarnation that we have chosen to learn from in our current lessons. And that's almost a direct quote from my friend Don Lay. And I'm sure he'll be speaking about that more. So I want to ask Rodger if where he's coming from when he asks what are the benchmarks for enlightenment and how do we know when we're enlightened? If you can pose that question so we can answer that, or if you have things to share about that.
Well, it's an interesting idea. This, in North America, we always want to strive, we want to achieve, we want to get somewhere. And people are always like, well, how do you ever know if you've made it there? And in my own experience, there's been dips in and out of universal love. And it's in those moments where you're in that space that I think you could be called enlightened. But you want to have that checked, wait till a life-challenging event comes along and see if you can continue to hold that same vibration. And I want to share a quick story. When I was training as a martial artist, I was working out at a dojo, and I was also a police officer at that time. And my teacher was a very small, skinny little guy who studied a form of Kung Fu. And we had a rather large prison guard from San Quentin Prison who began training with us. And the guy was on steroids, and he was literally called a goon. His job was to extract prisoners from their cells when they didn't want to come out. Interesting job. And he was a very brutal human being. My teacher was a very gentle man. He challenged my teacher in class, saying that he didn't think that the art we were practicing would actually work in the real world. To which my teacher replied, "You might be right. I've never been in a fight." He said, "I've studied for 25 years, but I don't go to places where fights happen. I don't look for fights, so I don't really know." He goes, "Yeah, that's what I figured. It's all a load of crap. Probably wouldn't work." He goes, "Well, let's find out." He goes, "What?" "Well, yeah, let's find out. You attack me, I'll use my skills, and we'll see if I can defend myself." Now, keep in mind that this man outweighed my teacher by 120 pounds. Well, the fight went down. My teacher just blocked. Although he had ample opportunities to strike back, he never did. After about 90 seconds, this large man collapsed onto the ground in utter exhaustion and couldn't rise. And my teacher went over and with compassion and love helped him up and thanked him for giving him his entire warrior spirit and for attacking him the way that he did, because it validated the last 25 years of his training. And he had no anger, no animosity. He held the compassion of love. And so I was astounded at that display of holding a loving vibration, even in the middle of a violent assault where this man was literally trying to hurt him. And so to me, that's an amazing example of an enlightened being who can hold that consciousness even in the middle of something like that. So that's what I wanted to share in terms of that particular aspect of it, John. How do we know when we're there? We see it all around us. And the more we hold that loving, compassionate vibration, no matter what's happening, I think the closer we are to source at any given time.
In the story that you tell, this person, your martial arts teacher, you considered him an enlightened being, somebody who was very, very conscious, and he was tested at that moment. Do you think that we can get by without having to have a martial arts fight with everybody if we think that we've hit some level of consciousness or enlightenment?
100%. And it's through these examples, it's through story, it's through interaction, it's through all of the pieces where we are sharing this type of an environment where everyone's story becomes a piece of information that anchors that loving vibration, that brings us back to the truth of it all. And no, you do not have to have these experiences, but it's very interesting when you think about somebody like Rumi, who says the doorway to God is found through the wailing of broken hearts. And it seems like when we're pushed to the edges is when we find those places more often than not, when life is just going along very smoothly without challenge.
Well, you know, I do not have that level of enlightenment like your martial arts teacher. When I drive in traffic, I am not the loving, compassionate person. And yet, in the last 2 years, since I've been actually working to develop myself spiritually, I do have more of a sense of humor as I watch myself, get upset by things. So it's not the same test as being attacked by a 350-pound prison guard, but I haven't passed that test, and I still think that the moments that I've had, where at least 3 moments in my life where I felt like I had hit enlightenment or gone beyond the veil or whatever it is, those are moments that I feel 24/7. Not always on the front of my consciousness, but I know that they're there, and it's changed me as a person. It's changed the way I am in the world. Paula, do you want to add something to that?
Well, I had been thinking about this topic, about enlightenment, and I had this thought just a couple of days ago about how ironic the path towards enlightenment is, or has been for me. I guess going back, I could say that I'd had several awakenings along the way throughout the years, and sometimes some of them stuck with me, and sometimes they were just a moment, and some of them would last a few years. But it really wasn't until I started meditating that I developed a certain method. And so, kind of answering your question, Rodger, like, do you have to have a certain method, or is it just kind of something you figure out on your own? And so I was kind of following a method, and I decided I'm just going to let go of everything. I'm going to work on myself and my heart and, my thoughts and my body and all that, and work through some of those issues and just kind of let it go and start going up, and seeing, how high I can go, as my teacher asked me, how high can, see how high you can go. So, I learned how to leave my body and then, just kind of sit in that place of no time or space, and there's just that bliss. And then you kind of go up and you jump into all these other realms, and there's all this stuff going on, and all of that, and you pass that. But the irony is that, as you rise up and you're working on yourself, becoming your highest self, your most pure state of consciousness, and everything gets very smooth and quiet, and then finally you're at that point where you realize that you're letting go of everything. You want to see what's left, because you want to touch God or whatever that is, or whatever you think it is, that goal, or and all of a sudden it's like you just know that you're starting to sense that there's almost like something running in the background, and that along the way you've touched different levels that were so sweet and exquisite that you just melted into that. And then finally but all the time you're there, you're there. And so finally it came to that, like the greatest act of courage, like, okay, I'm even going to let go of myself, just myself, and merge with that, with that ultimate sweetness, that I can experience. And it's like the moment you do it, it's like you don't care, you're just going to let everything go, and you do that. And then you sit with that, and it's like, it's just awesome. And the moment you do it, you realize that, oh yeah, this is the stuff that's been here all along. It was always here, and it was all there. And it's not about you anymore. And then you figure, well, I'm getting hungry. I think I'll go back, and you go back down through the levels, and you come back into your body, and there's all the stuff again, and you figure, I guess I'll go to the refrigerator and get something to eat. But the irony is that you do all this work, to get to your higher self and refine, just to throw it away, just to throw it all away. But what happened, the magic is that when I got back to the refrigerator, so to speak, I realized that it's like that program is still running in the background. It's like I can still feel its sweetness, and I can still just like be aware that it's there. And I still go about my day and do whatever I'm doing, and still have these things going on. I've got my feelings and my thoughts and everything. But in the background, there's that feeling, that sweetness. And I realize that quality is it's behind absolutely everything. It's in absolutely everything that's here or anywhere or nowhere. And so that's the best way I could kind of wrap that up.
Thank you, Paula. When we talked a little bit about this before, it reminded me of the movie series called The Matrix, where there was a science fiction thing, but there was something going on in the background, and it was something that we could all find. I think it's there for each one of us. We can all remember the divine spirit that is within us. We just may not be paying attention real consciously 24/7. It may just be coming up, and the way you stated it, it was always running in the background, and it's changed the way you might interact with the world. Don, do you have something that you want to add at this point?
Something's breaking up here on my end, John. I don't know what it is. I can't hear you very well. Can you hear me?
You sound good to me.
Oh, okay.
Especially when I unmute myself. You can hear me say, you sound good to me.
Okay. This is something that for me, the whole thing of enlightenment, over the years, the different things that I've heard from people or experienced with them or whatever, it really boils down to for me to, am I willing to let go of the box that I'm in and let my consciousness expand to include something that I may not even have any idea of what it's really like. And that all got hammered home to me in the near-death experience. But I remember somebody came out with a book one time, back when I was teaching, and the guy started off the book, the very first statement in the book, I think, or at least in the first paragraph, was, "I am enlightened. I have reached enlightenment." And I remember when I looked at that, I kind of thought, okay, whatever. I'm not sure what that means, because what does it mean? I've heard any number of people talk about all sorts of things around that. And to get it down on that simple level, again, it's about how far out can I expand my awareness. And in order to do that, I need to be willing, at least for my experience, for myself, is I need to be willing to let go of everything I know so that there's room for that which I don't know. And so it's like all the investments that I might have in my ideas or my way of seeing the universe. Enlightenment is a different way, to me, of seeing the universe. It's a different way of seeing myself. It's a different way of seeing other people. And in my way of thinking, that's for most people, there can be some exceptions to this, I think, probably, but for most people, enlightenment is a gradual process. I wake up a little bit more. I let go of some of the beliefs that I've had augured in all my life, and all of a sudden I become aware of a different dimension or whatever. And that process includes let me talk about when in that near-death experience, wherever I went, whatever that was about, all I knew was, and I've got almost photographic memory of that. I can't remember anything else. And I was out for 3 days, I guess it was, or nearly 3 days. And when I came back, first of all, I consciously came back. I knew that I had that choice about, well, are you going to go back or not? It's up to you, 100%. And it's like, I remember sort of contemplating that, if you could call it that, on that level, and kind of going, no, there's some things I still want to do. So I'm going back. But I'm not going to go back into my body without retaining the memory of this experience, and nor am I going to go back into my body without taking this particular vibration back into my body. Okay, that was fine. And I remember my body when I first opened my eyes and I was laying there in bed, and I could feel it all through my body. And it was just like almost quivering from this vibration that I was bringing back with me. And I remember at the time thinking, well, this is amazing. I'm loving it. And plus, I couldn't stop giggling. We've talked about this before. It was just, everything seemed so absurd on this level, coming from that other level. And the word that I've used before is petty. So much of what we get caught up in is so petty. That's including our intellect. I mean, that's a pettiness there. This is about experience. It's about being with yourself in an entirely new way, different way. Well, I spent, I guess it was 3 months before I finally got home. They put my body back together as best they could, and when I got here, and then I was in bed for a while, and finally I could get up a little bit. And I remember walking outside, and there's a bank of trees alongside where we live. And looking at those trees and kind of going, oh my God, I'll never see them the way I used to. And people would come in and to my room here and hang out with me for a while. And I'd be looking at them, and it was just like I can't describe it anything other than I was seeing them from a different place. It was more real to me. And intellectually and on a lot of other levels, I had accepted the idea that, you know, we're all spirit and we're all this. And I had experienced that in so many different ways. And all of a sudden, it took on a different light. It was just a more full experience of it and the reality of it. And then after that, I deliberately didn't read anything about near-death experience for 4 years or so. And because I didn't want to take in other people's experience, I just wanted to hang out with what was my experience. And I'm aware that, you know, on a body level, on a physical level, let me see if I can describe. For me, it was going out there and it was all automatic. I mean, everything was there. It was so clear in the love and the, you know, in the non-judgment, huge one, no judgment whatsoever on any level at all. And the joy and all that sort of thing. And then I was aware that my body, after I'd come in, my body's been operating in a certain way my entire life. And has that shifted over time? Well, of course it's shifted over time as I've grown and vibration coming up to a higher level and whatever. But I'm so acutely aware of, for the most part, there's a time dimension involved for us here. And that time dimension has to do with the body adjusting to a different vibration. And it's sort of like if I go off to Hawaii tomorrow and I get there, I'm not used to the climate. And after a week, 2 weeks, whatever, I've sort of acclimated some. But I've read somewhere where actually it takes about a year or 6 months or something before your body totally acclimates to the climate. And I think of it, that applies here as well. I'm hitting another climate and I'm seeing things from a different place. And that to me is a stage or a step, shall we say, in enlightenment. Is there such a thing as full enlightenment? I mean, it even occurred to me at some point, okay, I had this near-death experience. I know what that place looked like, and I know what it felt like, and I know what I experienced with that. And eventually it came out, I wonder what's beyond that. And we've got this focus always of reaching the end point. Okay, oh, now I've reached my goal. I want to be enlightened. Oh, now I'm enlightened. And I told this story the other night about, I was in India one time and I did a Vipassana retreat with a guy by the name of Goenka, who was a big name at that time. And he was talking about sitting and meditating. And his focus was, and he kept repeating over and over, I want to see the light, I want to see the light, I want to see the light. And then one day he was sitting there in that mode, and he said there was this tiny little candle flame, sort of, that showed up in front of him. And he's looking at that, he's saying, go away, I want to see the light. I want to see the light. Go away. I'm wanting to, you know, and it's like we come into these things with our expectations of what it's going to be like. And sometimes it'll go right past us and we never even see it because we've already defined what it's going to be or what my experience is going to be. And when I think of enlightenment, I think that's a really big one. What are the individual people, what's each one of them's concept of what enlightenment is. And yeah, so.
Well, Don, your story is so brilliant, and for people who are just tuning in, your whole story about your near-death experience, we have it on YouTube in our library. If you look up Masters of the Journey or you look up Don Lay's story, you can hear the experience. But most of us have not had a motorcycle accident where we almost die. And we're not encouraging people to do that, to reach enlightenment. At least I don't want the liability of people thinking that I'm encouraging them to do that. So the question is, can we all reach within and remember or have that epiphany or that experience or that awakening, whatever it is? Can we all do that? And can we do that without, like, say, sitting in a cave for 20 years and meditating? And does anybody have anything that they want to say about that? Rodger, are you interested in that?
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment on that. Don, you reminded me of a story that a monk told me one time, where he had just received his blessing from his organization, and he was a new monk, and he was meditating, and he had this big desire to see the spiritual eye. Like, this was his lifelong goal. So he's meditating, and all of a sudden he sees this light up here in the center of his forehead, and he's like, oh my God, oh, that's it. I'm going to see the spiritual eye, and it's getting closer, and it's more luminous. And then he smashes his head into the candle in front of him because he's actually falling asleep. So you have to keep your sense of humor, right, as you're going through this. And, some of us have an awakening in an event that takes place like you experienced. And others of us kind of chip away and have little experiences that over the course of years and decades begin to accumulate into a vibration of connection. And as Paula alluded to, you feel this vibration. And when you're in it, the goal is to just stay in that vibration as much as you possibly can, because once you begin to recognize it, and Don, you spoke to this too, you can then begin to expand it. And it's in that expansion that we become deeper and deeper immersed into the bliss of source consciousness. Ultimately, with enough practice, we can just remain in that place. And I think that's the thing. John, you had asked, is it necessary to have a teacher? Well, no, not necessarily. Some people have a life event and it just, boom, it's there. I've had many teachers, and each of those teachers has provided me another piece that has helped me take what I'll just call a step toward that direction of being in that vibration more and more and more. So, for the folks that might be watching this, if you're looking for the path, there is not one. It's so unique. I don't know a single person who said, oh yeah, I did it that way too. Like, it just isn't like that. So each of us has to kind of play with it. And I think the word play is a very important word, because we can get caught up in being very serious about it. And I think that's a trap. I think we're supposed to be playful, joyful, and find it through those pathways and just feel those vibrations and continue to expand them.
Yeah. Or you can be like I was at 19, which is painfully naive. And I can't go back and do that anymore. So I can't manifest my near-death experience and my insight about the other side of the veil just because I want to. I wish I could, but that's not possible for me. But it was nice that it's stuck with me, these past nearly 50 years, so that I can remember it just like it just happened, and find those feelings, even though in traffic, I'm not going to be spiritual. I mean, I just haven't figured that part out at all. And Paula, we were talking this afternoon, Paula, about people, and I want you to emphasize that if you can, people maybe missing their awakening or their epiphany because they don't have somebody to get some perspective on. Like, I didn't think it was any big deal until that guy lit up in the front of the room. Did you want to say a few more words about that, Paula? Uh-oh.
Yeah, I was just thinking that if you didn't have anybody to share it with, or anybody that had a clue about what you're talking about, you may not have a way of putting it into perspective, you know. Now, of course, when something really big happens, like a near-death experience, there's no doubt that you don't need to check with anybody else, you know, to get some feedback about that. But but still, you know, it's like young children that have, you know, very intuitive, for instance. They might think that's just natural, and everybody's like that, and they may not have realized till later on that, gosh, you know, it's kind of amazing looking back that they could pick up on so much, you know, just like that. So,
And you know,
I kind of found that interesting what you were saying, John.
I was out with my friend Don Lay. Oh, that Don Lay who's on the call with us. And he's told me the story before, but we bumped into a baby that's a few months old. Rodger, if you looked at this baby, you would say, the eyes of this baby, it's an old soul. It didn't look real young and innocent. It just looked very mellow. And it locked on to Don, and Don said, what did you ask the baby, Don?
I just said, do you remember where you came from? And it was just so clear that he knew exactly what I was talking about. At least to me, it seemed like that. And so then I said, well, remember that. Keep remembering that. And so hopefully something got through there, because, I mean, part of that brings up my childhood and the things that I remembered in early childhood, and then, you know, got poo-pooed and wiped out, whatever. I mean, just totally invalidated. And then again, from that near-death experience, coming back and saying, oh my God, that's where I used to go at night when I was, you know, in the privacy of my bedroom, where I wasn't being, you know, I didn't have to account for it. It's like that's where I was going every night. And also just playing with the different pieces of information, shall we say, that I then ran into again years and years later, all of which was unreal. I remember them taking me through running my Kundalini, playing with Merkaba, all those sorts of things. Those were happening to me. I was recalling all of that in my childhood. And that's kind of what triggered this thing with this baby, because that's the second time in just a couple of weeks that I experienced that with a child. And interesting enough, they're only a week or so apart in age. And the other one, when I said that to him, he just burst into this huge grin. And I said, yeah, okay. And you know, in my interaction with him before, he was just fixated. There wasn't any expression particularly. But it's like, again, we need those reminders. And we probably didn't get them when we were growing up. But if we're around children, you know, it's a communication on another level. Don't even have to use words. It's just hi on another level, and they'll get it. And, you know, essentially giving them permission to stay in touch.
You know, all of us I mean, if I believe that in the metaphysical stuff that I've been learning in the last couple of years, all of us are born with that, and then we're kind of trained out of it, and then we come back later in life, and an experience will trigger it, or a learning or a discipline that we're practicing. It asks us to remember the divine perfection within us. It asks us to remember it, not necessarily to learn it brand new, because it seems familiar sometimes when we've experienced it, but it brings it back to our consciousness. And since none of us are babies anymore, because our parents wouldn't let us be on the computer right now if we were babies.
Yeah.
But in a sense, it's nice to be in a group of people, even if we are coming from different parts of the country, to feel like we're being supported, and people are saying to us, remember where you came from. And, what does it take for us to feel like we can re-engage and remember that, and maybe live that a little bit more, I don't know, strongly or effectively or efficiently, whatever. I mean, I'm still dancing around with, and I fully admit that I get frustrated and I really lose that unconditional love at certain times in my life. I don't think that that's bad, because I think it's genuine. I just have to remember how ridiculous that is and work on it, and keep trying to be in a different space when I interact with all of the other pilgrims we're all trying to get to the same place. We may not all know that, but we are. So are there any other concepts or questions that come up right now that we can kind of address this issue before we get to the God question?
John, I want to add one thing to what you just said, because, there's a tendency to think that you will not be hijacked by life events. But the emotions that we feel are all connection. So let me give you an example. I recently just had my home burglarized, and they took all the valuable stuff. So I'm putting my life back together, and that's challenging. The very next day, I went out and replaced my computer, and within an hour of setting that computer up, I got hacked so deep that I was locked out of my own computer. All the passcodes were changed, and the hacker was in real time working on my computer. I had to sever my internet connection to stop that. Now the threat of identity theft is on me, and that's been pressuring me this week and doing all of that. And so I've had these waves of what you would call unenlightened energy coming through me. And my tendency would be to stuff those down, to try to get back to the loving vibration. But the truth is, those energies are so intense, I can't get there. And so the old Rodger would have just stuffed it down. The new Rodger says, okay, I'm experiencing rage, and I'm going to rage. So I went upstairs into my gym. I screamed and yelled some expletives. I hit my heavy bag until I couldn't hit it anymore. And then the next wave came, and I did it again. And then the next wave came, and I did it again. And then it was gone. And what I felt in its place was the loving vibration of connection again. It was there again as my foundation. I could have stayed stuck in that other energy for days, weeks, months, the rest of my life. But I chose to honor what was real for me in that moment. And I think that's one of the pathways to really understanding this idea of being connected into that source energy, is to just honor where you are, be it fully, let it move itself through your inner space, and then go back to that loving source vibration. So I just wanted to toss that in.
Thank you. A lot of people, are saying that you can't be in the high spiritual new age place if you ever let anger in your life. And I want to argue about that. I don't know that I have the grounds to do that very well, because I'm familiar with anger. I grew up with a lot of it in my family, and I'm familiar with it, and I do it really well. And you like to do what you're good at. I mean, it's not like I'm trying something new. I don't necessarily recommend that we be angry or that we feel angry, but I think that expressing it and honoring it so it doesn't get buried in stuff and block us or make us feel bad on a different level. I mean, I do think we need to figure things like that out, because the world is going to continue to challenge us. Our lessons in our physical life and being are ones that are not supposed to be easy and sweet all the time. I learn much more from making mistakes and from stepping into bad situations than I learn when things are going very well and everything is as I would expect, which, of course, expectations screw things up. But that's another story. So we need to learn our lessons. I visited with my friend Rodger in Colorado a couple of weeks ago, and I really feel pain that he went through this experience, and it happens to us no matter where in the world we are, even if we are setting ourselves up in lifestyles that seem safe and seem comfortable and seem mellow. So at least you've got a story to share about, how you're dealing with that. So thank you for sharing that. Before we move along, I wanted to just remind everybody that we had chatted about at the beginning of this conversation a question that Paula had brought up this week about whether you need to believe in God to become enlightened, or whether an atheist can ever achieve enlightenment. And if not, then what would the spiritual path for an atheist be? And just to start that off, I'm gonna say two things. I don't know what God is, because everybody might have a different definition of that. It might be the same thing as what I feel right now is the divine spirit, and I just don't call it God. I don't know. And I don't call it God because when I was young, I did have bad religious experiences which wanted me to turn away from formalized religion. And I said that I was an atheist. I was very rational. I wasn't even agnostic. I really had turned away from it. And life has a way of saying, okay, you can turn away from it, but maybe there's a different definition, and maybe it really is as much a part of you, even if you don't do a formal religious training or belief. Does anybody else want to address whether we need to believe in God to be enlightened?
Can I say something?
Oops.
Jim, did you have something to say?
Yeah.
We're listening.
Yeah, I just find the God is a tool that we've created to help us get a release, relaxation. It's a very big concept, a bigger concept than you or I. And when we focus in on something big, particularly the nebulous aspect of it, the mystery of it, that's why they have God as a mystery. What mysticism is dwelling in that mystery. Then our brains stop functioning any longer. We're not thinking about things, so they stop sending impulses, electrochemical impulses. It allows our body to relax, which is something we feel is good. And if you look up the word God, for instance, in a dictionary, you'll see that it comes from, or some people say it comes from the word good, and it's an eternal goodness. So this is a method that we use to help us feel this eternal goodness of relaxing our bodies and experiencing goodness in everything we do. It's just one method that has been developed over time, and it works. And of course, when we think of God as a person, then we create a contraction there around it, because that defines everything when we have all these definitions, and it works against us for that methodology.
Thank you so much for expanding our consciousness, and letting it be certainly more than what I saw in my childhood, when I was told that there was a vengeful God, and he was very powerful, and I would like to think that that meditation and some of the activities that we can get to really quiet ourselves and appreciate the beauty or the matrix or whatever that thing running in the background that Paula was telling us about as far as consciousness is embedded in everything that we see, every living thing and perhaps every inanimate thing that exists in the world that we've created. So God is a lot more present if we define it that way. Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
Yeah, Don.
Yeah. Again, it's that question of what's the definition of God? It gets back to that, and you ask any 10 people, you can get 10 different answers, probably. And the people that I've known, am I showing up on there at all, or does it matter? It doesn't really matter. Everybody else pops in their picture, and mine doesn't. But you can hear me, right? Okay. So I've known people who were avowed atheists. And when I hung out with them, and it was like then discovering they weren't, it's like they didn't believe in God because the God that had been defined for them was they were not in agreement with, let's put it that way. He's this big bearded guy that, sits up there somewhere with his gavel to, whack on the great judge's desk as you show up. And people, just innately, I think, sense that there's something wrong with that. They just can't buy it. But these very people have been some of the most spiritual people I've known. They were more in tune with the environment, as an example, or, so many different elements. It's like we come into this, my way of seeing this, we come into this body to experience the body reality, shall we say, and then do whatever we want to do with it. If we want to stay buried in it, fine. If we want to raise it up to where, okay. And there seems to be a lot of raising up that's trying to happen right now. At this, in my experience anyway, is the energy is shifting. That's my perception. And people are becoming more aware. I'm hearing people say things that I never would have expected to hear them say. And it's like, it's all changing. And can I be with that? And that starts tying back into the whole concept of enlightenment. And I think what I'd like to propose, what I do propose to people is, hey, you're already enlightened. To whatever degree you are, you're there. And so how about we just start there, that's a state of enlightenment, and then start to expand that a little bit. And as Rodger was talking about the emotional thing that we can go through, and it's the same dynamic. People have an image of what it is to be spiritual. Oh, you'll never be upset again. You'll never blah, 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 blah. It's endless, absolutely endless. You're probably not going to want sex anymore either. For some of us, that's a little hopeless. I might as well give up right there. And it's like, what are the concepts that we've been molded into? And somehow we've accepted them. For better or for worse, we've accepted them. And my focus, all the years that I was teaching, my focus was, and I still believe, I get somebody to touch themselves on a deeper level so that they can get in touch with what it is that they already know how to do, which I knew how to do when I was 3 years old, 4 years old, in bed at night. And it's like, start to open those doors again and let that start to come through. Be with that part of me that already has my own answers, or at least knows which direction to point me in so that I can begin to get them. And, and it starts opening the whole thing about teachers and all that. Everybody's a teacher to me. I've gotten some lessons from homeless guys on the street that you'd look at them and think, oh my God. And some of those most profound things come out of their mouth, So it's like, can I just experience being here and enjoying this process as much as I can? I actually had a phone call today from a woman that I know, and she said, I've got a question for you. And I said, yeah, okay. And she was preparing a talk that she was going to give, and she wanted to know what my experience was. And she said, after your crash, and you came back and you were laid up for all that time, and you're still, working at it, were you ever depressed? And I had to think about, was I ever depressed? No, I was never depressed. But that had to do with I was staying in that constant state of in touch with what I'd experienced out there and looking at here, and that sort of realization, as I was putting it out earlier, the pettiness that we get caught up in. Oh, I've got a hangnail. That's no different than losing your leg, in some ways. I mean, it's almost as insignificant on this bigger level, not to say that, I'm going to take huge risks of, destroying my body. No, I mean, we need to learn how to take care of these too. Unfortunately, I don't know about you, I didn't get an instruction manual when I came in. And so I've had to sort of learn for myself. So anyway, for whatever that's worth.
Getting back to the God side of thing, you brought up a point, and Rodger did as well. It triggered something for me. When I was 25 years old, pretty much militantly unreligious or anti-religion in many ways. I backpacked 2 days into the high country in the Central Sierra. I was up at a place called Evolution Meadow. It's right about timberline. It's about 92 or 9,300 feet in the Sierra Nevada. And for whatever reason, as I got there, I don't think I was delirious because of elevation or exertion, but maybe that explains it. I don't know. I got there and I looked up, and above me were the mountains that surrounded me. It was just rock and glaciers and blue sky, because above me there weren't any trees. I was at timberline. I looked up to that, and for whatever reason, the thought came to my mind and the words came to my mouth that I was in God's cathedral. It was such an awe-inspiring beauty that I appreciated after all the effort I had made to get to that place, that it was a spiritual experience, and I wasn't even expecting that. That wasn't what I was open to at the time. It caused me, because nature can be appreciated and it is so awe-inspiring. And each one of us has had those moments when we've seen a cloud, or we've seen a mountain, or we've seen the trees changing behind me from my neighborhood at this time of year, where you really appreciate the majesty and spectacular things that we can appreciate. And I think that brings our spirit, it fans the flame and makes our heart and soul just warm in a spiritual sense. And if anybody wants to contribute or say something about that, we're open to that. Not all at once.
Well, that to me just opens up that whole door around, it's written all through nature. I mean, it's in the Ayurvedic tradition. I was just ran into something today. It was a quote saying, God is everything. And it's like, okay, can I let that in? What does that mean? And and then if you want to look at somebody when you're saying that, it's like, hey, that's you too. I mean, we all are that. And can we be with that and have that be real? And most people sort of take the approach that, well, that's absolutely fine, except me. God's not here. I need to find it. And it's like, shut up, just tune in, start to say hello to a different level. I mean, there's a certain arrogance to that statement of accept me. And it's like, out of everybody in the universe, God selected me to be the one that he was going to withhold from. That makes me pretty special in a way. I mean, if we can just get absurd with it, it is absurd. The whole thing is just, it's nuts. But again, getting back to that, the way this was introduced to me back in the late 60s, the first time I heard this said, and it was just a very, very, such a simple statement. And it was, remember who in fact you really are. I mean, that went right over my head. I didn't have a clue what it was talking about. And it was like, I'll think about that for a while. Good, think about it. And it was like, getting all wound up in what it means, to remember. And then we try to, with our intellect, remember. No. It's touch, experience, be with, blah, 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 whatever. So anyway, did I make enough noise on that one?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Don. Yeah, and somebody will explain that to me much later.
Okay.
But
can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm wondering if you notice how our egos, even after our awakening, our egos are keeping us from really understanding what's going on with us, how we think of ourselves as so special, as divine, or important, or something like that, and therefore we don't want to know the mechanics, for instance, of what's actually going on in the human organism as it's having these phenomena or experiences. Most people aren't interested. Have you found that to be something you've experienced, that most people really don't want to understand what's going on because it seems to degrade the value of themselves or human consciousness or whatever you want to call it? Have you noticed that phenomena?
Does anybody want to handle that? Look at you guys. Well, I will say that you see, I'm the newbie in the group. The other main presenters, Rodger and Don.
For me, I don't know.
Go ahead, Paula. Did you freeze up? Uh-oh, we lost Paula. I was going to say she'll be back, I hope. I was going to say, I'm the newbie of the group, so I would say what I have learned is that the ego wants to make us separate and keep us separated and not disconnected from the divine spirit and from all the other souls that we exist. It does that by comparing us and saying we're better than or we're less than or whatever. And if we do that, I think we fall into the trap
so for me, I think that
judgment.
I've always been curious about how things work.
Oh, sorry, Paul. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you went blank for a while.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just having some computer problems, I think so. But okay. But I think just for me, I'm not going to say it's like I've always been curious about how things work, rather than ignoring about how things work. I'm really interested in how things work, and I'm really curious about that. And I'm always, tuning into what other people have to say about how they think things work, and and everything, because I think that, you know, if one person can experience something, well, then anybody can. Now, they may not experience it in the same way because everybody's perception of what's going on, their interpretation of it is going to be different. Everybody's going to be different. But if one person can, some phenomenon or whatever, then that means that anybody can. You know, it's open to anybody. So that's my opinion.
Well, and we actually heard most of it, I think, because you're a little bit in and out. But
Yeah.
I wasn't bringing up the fact that I wasn't saying that we can't experience it, but that we're not open to things, and that's what the transition, the process is about. It's about getting us open to see or experiencing what we want to experience. We're not open to feeling good about something or enjoying, appreciating things because of our mind tells us we're not supposed to be open to it for some one reason, like, oh, we can't enjoy planes driving into the World Trade Center on 9/11 because that's horrible. All these people are suffering. So we can't love that situation and love the drama of it because our egos, which are involved here in this, just don't let us go in these places. And the same thing, we don't want to understand what's going on with us because our egos are saying, I'm more than just a machine that's having these experiences. I have a soul, I've got spirit, I've got da-da-da-da. I'm divine, or whatever terminology we've been programmed with. That says I can't listen to that language and understand that simple things that it's just what we want. That's all I was saying.
Thank you.
You know, Jim, I like that sentiment there. And, you know, one of the constructs of the ego is survival. And what threatens the ego more than anything is facing its own annihilation in downloading source energy completely and living in that vibration. So it feels a threat to that. And that threat can manifest in ways that the ego makes constructs around that. For example, I'm not worthy. That person's worthy, but, you know, I'm never going to be that person. There's always this threat that the ego feels when it becomes close to that source consciousness because it has to surrender its identity. And so therein lies one of the bigger challenges that I've faced throughout my spiritual journey, is the one of me being worthy of being connected to source. My ego has played that game with me.
Thank you. So you know, we're getting into a good conversation, and yet I have to wind this down because we've been on a long time. And I would love to have everybody here let me know what the next direction is with the conversation. But one of the things that I've learned, well, first I need to quote a very important human being to me, a friend of mine by the name of Rodger Ruge from Netherlands, who reminded me of the old Zen saying, says, before enlightenment, you chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, you chop wood and carry water. And that, Rodger, you'll explain that to me, because I understand. It's a matter of getting on with our life, no matter how close to the divine we think we get in this incarnation. We're still needing to do one foot in front of another as we follow our path. Thank you for that quote. And one of the other things that I've learned from this evening, and I've heard in conversations with my friend Don Lee, is, the guy who's on the line with us, is that if we're ever in a position, this is what I think I've learned by witnessing him, if we're ever in a position to see a very young child, someone 0 to 4 or 5 years of age, if we can encourage them and support them and love them, no matter what the behavior is, because we want them to not forget. We want them to remember as long as they possibly can where they came from, so that they don't have to wait as long as I did to be in touch with that. And I think that that's a blessing when we can reach around and support other people, but particularly our young ones. And we didn't have Daryl Dipty on the phone, but he's written a children's book called The Caterpillar That Became Enlightened. And I am going to send out a video link for that, and I encourage you to look at it. It's a children's story that's not just for children, and it's about finding the wisdom, remembering the spirit and the divine spirit that's we have within us. And it's a spectacular book for us to share with children, but for us to take and remember for ourselves. And I would like to have him back on the line when I can get him on the line to do an interview with him and get his thinking. He's a spectacular young man who's still in active military, and he's a blessing. Whenever I'm in the room with him, I really feel blessed. Any parting words from anybody before we call it an evening?
Yeah. I think what you were just talking about, John, for me, with those kids, it's like saying hello to who they really are. You know, that's the thing that they may be lacking in their life. It's like who in fact they really are. And the Rodger, the thing that you said about chop wood, carry water, you know, then you reach enlightenment and you chop wood, carry water. And when I read that, I automatically wanted to tack on to the end of it, you know, continue looking for enlightenment. It's like expand it, you know, it's like, yeah. I don't, again, I don't see an end to this. But anyway, that's my quirkiness.
Yeah. Any other words for right now?
Yeah, I want to just add, you know, Don, thanks for that. That was awesome. And I appreciated your wisdom and insights tonight. Thank you very much for that. And what I would encourage everyone who's watching, the world needs us to share. It needs us to not be silent, and it needs us to mentor. And even if that's just a single person, but when we find someone who's looking for a little bit of life advice, we need to share that. We need to, excuse me, be available for that, because the things are in turmoil. And so the more that those of us that have a little bit of experience can share and help someone else take a positive step, the more we move the world forward. There's a tendency, I think, for a lot of people who are on a spiritual journey to feel a bit oppressed at the moment, a bit shut down, maybe withholding a lot of the wisdom that's within inside them. And, you know, the Masters of the Journey is a great place to come and share that. So I appreciate this venue, John. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for everybody for participating in this. My name is Dr. John Mason with Masters of the Journey. We have our website, mastersofthejourney.com, and we have our events often listed at our Facebook page, which is Facebook Masters of the Journey. We will have more in the future. If I hear back from you, that's great. I'm going to stop the recording from right now, and let me just put that on